Okay, so we are recording. Just so you guys know, if you go onto my YouTube link, like I posted the video for the company research project, which was essentially one of our classes. I designated the class to understand how to do the company research project, which I posted on the announcements. If you open up the YouTube video and you click on my profile, I've uploaded every single class that I think almost every single class that we've had. Maybe there's one or two classes I just need to upload, so it's on my computer. But you can see all our prior recorded classes. You can even see my other semesters. You can see everything. So you'll be able to see the class links um under there. But I will probably just do like a dump upload. I'll do an announcement and I'll just post all the different classes. But if you're curious about seeing any prior class you might have missed, if you look at the announcements, you look at the post I made where I uploaded the instructions, the class I did with the instructions on the company research project. That YouTube link will show all the other classes I upload. I just didn't post the links up on Brightspace. But if you click on it, you can just see everything. So if you missed a class, you can look at. It's not relevant for your exams. It's just for your own personal growth and development. All the material from your exams is pretty much straight out of the textbook, right? So just for you to just so you know, if you're wondering what's going on with that, you're recording the lectures, where the records, it's been uploaded on my YouTube, but you guys click into it, okay? Uh, so we're here on chapter 11, human resource management. I think it's a different chapter under uh Pearson. It might be chapter 9 or something. But it coincides with our weeks. So just a little aside about human resource management. Uh it's important to understand that human resources in particular, is for the benefit of the employer, not the employee. Okay. So the employees who work at HR, they're paid by the company, right? So their job is to sort of facilitate the management of the human resources of the company, right? That includes processes, laws, procedures, things that help protect you, the employer, and also the employee. It's for the benefit of the company. Okay? HR is not for your personal protection. You feel like you're being discriminated or something, they're not there to protect you, right? They're there to protect themselves. So this is important to remember, that HR is a function for the benefit of the employer. That's the company. Okay. That doesn't mean they can't assist you. If the company has policies and standards that are being broken, and you're involved in a process where you're being affected in a negative way, a negative outcome, the company wants to enforce its standards and policies, right? So in that situation, HR would be of assistance in that manner. But you have to think intelligently as to whether or not it's in the company's best interest or not. If it's in the company's best interest to maintain those standards and follow those standards, then yes. If it's not in their best interest because they know they're deliberately not following the standards and procedures that are maybe legal, because of financial or money purposes, then yes, you if you go to HR, then you may not get much traction, because the HR firm, the HR is the human resource department of a company is for the benefit of the company. Okay, so if you're having issues and you're in a union, go to your union. Okay, you got to talk to your union rep or find the right department. Some unions are better than others. Some unions will really help you out. Some might be difficult. Sometimes you might have to be a squeaky wheel gets the oil and figure it out. But if you're having challenges, sometimes it's better to consult your union rep first to discuss the best course of action before you go to HR. Okay? HR's purpose is predominantly to ensure the company is managing its legal capacity as far as its employees are, mitigating any risk factors that could occur in a legal environment due to employee human management, human resource management, and also managing all the other stuff, the payroll, the hiring, staffing, stuff like that. Okay. So important to understand the situation you're in. Uh, Sometimes you might need legal counsel, right? So these are things you guys might not understand or know about because you're not out there in the workforce. So I'm telling you now, so you know, all right, what's going on. All right. So just be mindful of the circumstances. So human resource management is defined as the process of determining human resource needs and then recruiting, selecting, developing, motivating, evaluating, compensating, and scheduling employees to achieve organizational goals. So it's the purpose of managing human resource, humans as resource, human resource, to achieve the company's goals. That's the simple explanation, right? So it says that HR's roles has grown because of increased recognition of employees as a resource. A larger company may have more employees, so the need for human resource management is more important. The more important reason being is a change in laws that rewrote old workplace practices. That means that employees and businesses weren't really doing things by the book and maybe just being kind of illegal with the way they're doing things for the purposes of their own benefit, maximizing profit, so on and so forth. And because those changes to laws and the risk factors it presents to the company, the human resource is there to sort of make sure that those guidelines are being properly procedurized as far as the relationship between the employee and the firm. Meaning, let's not get sued, right? Let's make sure we have an HR department to handle everything. So here's sort of like the human resource sort of guideline, right? What do they do? So human resource, we'll start with it's tied to the organization's goals, right? It's not tied to your goals. So whatever your personal goals are, that doesn't matter. It's tied to the goals of the company, the organization's goals. So you remember that, right? Number one. So then from those goals is the job of recruitment, right? The selection from those recruitment process, the training and development of those individuals, not always, but mostly. Motivation, which we can get into, maybe not, but that could be like salary, things that motivate, uh, packages, things of that sort. Evaluation, the compensation benefits. Now, when they say motivation, they're referring to the things we went over in the prior chapter. But compensation benefits is usually, I would say, the key motivating factor for a lot of people's employment. They want to get paid, right? You're not taking a job if you don't get paid. That's just how it is. Scheduling and employee union relations, because if you have a union, you go to your union, right? If you have an issue, you don't go to HR, you go to your union, and then you let them talk to HR for you and deal with the situation. That's how that works. Okay. If you don't have a union, then you're at a disadvantage in that scenario. Okay. Then there's the career management, and it ties back to human resource management, right? So HR facilitates all these little functions on this panel, but the most important thing you also notice is it's surrounded by this word called legal environment, right? You'll see legal environment right here. So what does that mean? It means that there's a genuine legal component to their job role, right? It's sort of the underlying or overpinning factor to why human resource exists. You can have a department that does the recruiting, the selecting of employees, the training, and whatever. But there's laws, and who's following the laws, right? So that's why the legal environment is something you see surrounding this whole thing, because that's what it's about. Okay, so for example, we just jump into it. So laws, right? Okay. Civil Rights Act of 1964. So Title VII prohibits discrimination in hiring, firing, compensation, apprenticeship training, terms, conditions, or privileges of employment based on race, religion, creed, sex, national origin, right? So that means you could be of a specific race, but you have a different national origin, age, sexual orientation, gender identity. So these are issues employers discriminate all the time. I've had friends tell me flat out they feel like they're being not at CUNY with different organizations, okay? And CUNY is very inclusive. That they felt like they were being singled out because of their sexual orientation. Uh, and from my opinion, they're a really excellent hard worker, someone you would want on their team. But it was surprising that sort of treatment was coming from that employer, right? And they left. They didn't make a stink out of it because they couldn't really prove their point, which is another issue, right? But they felt like there is definitely issues there. So these things still happen to this day at large multinational firms, and people deal with these issues. It's just hard to tell if that problem is really a genuine issue. So part of HR's role is to sort of manage human resources in accordance to these laws, right? Are we making sure that we're picking everyone, hiring people based upon uh, qualifications and credentials versus these factors, their age and so on and so forth, their race, their religion, right? So we have the 1972 Equal Opportunity Act, right? It strengthened the Equal Opportunity Commission, giving it broad powers. So the right to issue workplace guidelines for acceptable employer conduct, can mandate specific record-keeping procedures, the power of enforcement for its mandates, and it enforces affirmative action, which is employment activities designed to right past wrongs, to increase opportunities for minorities and women. Okay, so another issue, HR. Are we in line with affirmative action? Are we equal opportunity employer? Right, you hear that sometimes. So Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs. So this ensures that employers doing business with the federal government comply with the non-discrimination and affirmative action laws. And the Civil Rights Act of 1991 gave victims of discrimination the right to jury trial and possible damages. So you can sue, right? That's what that said. So uh, it's important to understand that these rights are important, right? These rights affect you as a student, as a future employee or employer. These rights affect you. So you need to know your rights. So this seems maybe kind of boring a little, but it's not, because if you don't know your rights, how do you know if an employer is discriminating against you, right? How do you know if what they're doing is right or wrong? So it's important to understand your rights. It's important to understand the scenario and the situation. So this one is the 1990 Americans with Disabilities Act. So it requires employers to give applicants with physical or mental disabilities the same consideration for employment as people without disabilities. In 1990, that's not that long ago, right? That's like 30 plus years, 35 years from today, which is not a long time ago. This is all kind of recent. You can imagine all the discrimination things people dealing with, and then the fighting and the suing, and then finally they pass a law to be fair to people, right? So anyway, The passage in 2008, Americans with Disability Amendments expanded protection, and 2011 saw regulations that widened the gap of disabilities covered by the ADA. Right, it shifted proof of burden of disability from the employee to the employer. Now the employer is saying, "Well, I don't believe you're disabled." The employer has to prove, "Well, prove to me I'm not disabled." Or you have people that they take advantage. You have employers, employees, right? People pretending to have mental issues and they have a doctor sign off because whatever, right? They play these games, they play these legal games, and it's a legal fight. So the company's like, well, what do we do, right? So there's the whole legal industry is built around this, right? Doctors and make their practice around these things uh, is what it is. So as an employee or an employer, one of your objectives is making sure that you have inclusivity. So sometimes you'll see that sound bad, right? But it's the truth. Well, you hire someone with disabilities, and that's our guy, right? He's got disabilities. So we don't discriminate against people with disabilities. Look, John over there, he's disabled, right? He's in a wheelchair. So how can we be discriminatory against people with disabilities if we've hired someone with disabilities? But then he's the only guy there in a wheelchair, right? So they hire one guy and then don't hire anyone else, and they'll say that's our token guy. They won't say that, but they'll say we meet the requirements, right? We're not discriminating. You can't say we're discriminating. So the legal case comes against them. They can say not true. Look, we got people who are disabled, and that happens, right? So that those are the things. That's why there's companies that hire certain quotas for certain types of people, certain things, because lawsuits, because of laws, because of company objectives and what they want to do versus what the law says, and aligning with their own agendas, their own nature, and the things they want and who they want to hire. So you got to know your laws. You got to understand how these things work. There's so much. If you took a legal class, a CUNY legal class, uh, around this subject matter, there's so many lawsuits, and legal proceedings, and uh, ramifications on how these suits turned out and what happened, and all the legal law and case law surrounding the outcomes of these legal suits. So much so that you can literally know the risk factor of what you can and can't do, right? What you shouldn't do, what the cost would be legally if you didn't follow the laws, right? So it's unfortunate that in this day and age people are still dealing with this. So for example, over here is age discrimination. ADEA protects workers 40 and over from employment and workplace discrimination, right? And there's a reason why, is because what if you does someone really want to hire a 90-year-old with dementia? Probably shouldn't be working, right? But there's issues with age discrimination, right? Older employees are slower, they have more health issues, more challenges, so on and so forth, right? They might be more expensive depending on the situation. So, there's definitely age-related discrimination. Now you walk into a Home Depot and you don't see that, right? They hire people all ages. They're a good place to go, but I think that's why people will apply there because they know they're hiring them. But age discrimination is a real issue, right? I have clients say, they tell me, yeah, it's an issue. They're older, and they'll say, yeah, I think it's a problem. Why how this guy get promoted? I'm more experienced, and I've been doing X, Y, and Z, and there's reasons for why companies discriminate, but it is against the law. So while this is a super common thing, it's against the law. So if you come to work with me at my company and I try to hire you, I can't ask you, do you have a disability? How old are you? You know, the hiring manager, can't choose. It's like you don't put your age on your resume. right? You wouldn't put your age on your resume. Obviously, if your resume says you've been working since 1970, I can take a pretty good guess how old you are, right? You're very seasoned, and that may be good for the job. Well, you got the experience, right? Maybe someone says it's too old for the job. Who knows? So, you can't just ask people their age. Someone shouldn't be asking their age. Um, the most of the HR obviously needs to know your age, right? They're the ones doing the recruiting, right? They're the ones making a determination based on requirements, but usually it's a manager or a supervisor or someone that's making a choice, and they're not looking at the age because it's discriminatory, right? I'm not asking, hey, do you suffer from anxiety, depression? Do you hear voices in your head? Do you have mental disability? Like, you can't ask those questions, right? Because why do you need to know those questions if you're not trying to discriminate against me, right? You're not trying to discriminate against me, you don't even know. So those are things to understand. So if you're in a job interview and they ask that, that's a red flag. It's not only a red flag, it could be a legal case. Then how would you prove it, right? So if you have proof of it, then they put an email, that's a problem. So be aware of your rights, understand how these things work, understand how they affect you, and understand that companies still take advantage of it. If they can get away with it, they'll get away with it, right? So sometimes a human resource firm, the firm which has human resource, I should say, human resource department, they might be very good at trying to hide their agendas too. They excel at it. And the human resource department is trying to make sure that they look like they are not discriminatory. But in fact, they are. And people complain all the time about that stuff. Certain type of companies. I'm not going to say any companies. We all got our own stories. But it's an issue, right? So it is what it is. People should hire you based upon what? Why do you think someone should hire you? Based upon your qualifications, that you can do the job? Should they hire you because you look like them? Because you guys, know each other's families very closely? Oh, you grew up in the same town as me. You hear that something. There's people like that, right? Oh, you from the same small town I am. Oh, I can trust you. People do. Managers make decisions like that. I know of a situation like that. And the guy's a nice guy. I'm like, you're not qualified for that job, but that's why you got the job. And that happens all the time. Is that discriminatory though? Is there a law saying I can't hire you because you went to the same small town as me? Anyway, it happens, right? It's called cronyism, I believe. But that's what it is. So, you could always go out there and start your own business, sell some hot dogs, flip some stuff on Amazon, whatever. At the end of the day, you don't need other people to tell you how to make money. You can make your own money, even if you have a trade skill, right? If you're an electrician, if you're a carpenter, you could bid on jobs directly, small jobs, and take a self-employed route. So you're not always limited to the discretion of the employer. You could become the employer, right? And then these become your problems. But if you're a lone gun, it's just you as one employer doing your job and getting cases and work, then it's less of an issue, right? All right, so effects of legislation. Employers must know the law and act accordingly. Legislation affects all areas of human resources. changes in law and legislation occur regularly, right? So someone in the chat said, based on your ability to do the job, definitely, right? And then some people use that as a complaint. They'll say, well, then why do we have um, affirmative action? Why are we hiring you because of your race? If you're just able to do the job, you should do the job. The argument being is you're making up for, uh, actually, I'll literally just go back to it, righting the past wrongs and increasing opportunities that were denied to certain people, right? So there's that. So the question becomes, an organization needs to meet its requirements of its goals. Its needs need to be met. Then it also needs to follow these laws as well. And the laws sometimes don't align with the company's objectives or the desires of people that work the company who are in a position of management or direct or leadership. Right? And you have challenges as a result of that. So determining a firm's human resource needs. So human resource planning process as preparing a human resource inventory of employees. So who do we need? Right? What's the job? So what are the requirements, the job, what do you need to do for the job, and what skills you need to have for the job. And assessing future human resource demand. So, what more might we need? If you have, I use a restaurant, you have 10 restaurants. How much, resource demand do you need? How many employees do you need? What if you're short-staffed? Do you hire one extra busboy, one extra cook, just in case something happens, you can offload, labor? That happens, right? So, assessing the future labor supply and then putting a plan, a strategic plan into place. Remember, the word strategy is more implicated to shorter term planning versus long term. Okay. So strategic initiatives, decisioning and actioning in that way. So job analysis, I just kind of mentioned briefly. Job analysis is describing the job. What is the job? What does it require you to do? Then the specification is what do you need to be able to do that job? Meaning the job you got to do X, Y, and Z. And to do that, you need to have 2 years experience, a good attitude, good communication skills. That's blah, 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 right? So description and specification are 2 things. So when you put together a resume, they taught you back in my day, they taught you how to do a resume, right? It's how you do a proper resume. It's not the same anymore. It's totally different. Now you have computers looking at your resume, analyzing your resume. You have AI programs, you have automated systems looking for keywords, and because they get thousands of resumes, these have people look at your resume. Now they have a machine dump through 10,000 resumes and pick 2 or 10 or 20, and then that's what's coming to the HR desk, and that's what's coming to the management desk to say, oh, okay, who are we going to interview, right? The hiring process. And it's funny because I read something on Reddit. I don't remember the exact details, but someone used AI to either they were in the position or they did a trial or a test or something where they used AI to vet their resumes for all the job candidates, and then they are going over the data of which resumes that AI accepted, and I found that the one of the key data pieces, which is interesting, was that the resumes that were flagged as being created through AI were more likely to be accepted by the AI program as a passing job resume. Okay. So if you want to get a resume together, so when you look at a job you're interested in, it's called job posting. The job posting will look exactly like this page here. It's going to have a job description. It's gonna have job specification and it's gonna list what the job is. That's what a job posting. Any firm or company's job posting will be broken down like this. Okay. That's why this is important. Then you take that job analysis, okay, and then you put it into AI, like ChatGPT or something, and say, hey, based upon this job analysis, create me a model resume. And it'll pop out a resume. Then you can take your own resume with all your data, your all the jobs you worked at, all the job specification, title, experience, and titles you have, and say, model my resume to look like this job analysis based upon this resume that was created, and it'll take the data and craft it and make it look like that, right? So then you apply, and then you may or may not get the job, obviously, but it is able to. So you know AI can do that. So you're going to see more companies using AI to sort through lots of workloads, HR workloads for resumes. And the irony is, to beat that, you just need to use AI for your thing. At least for now, right? We don't know how that's going to work out, but that's what's been shown to be the case. So if I had to modify my resume today, targeting something specific, I may want to get AI involved, essentially. Okay. That's good for you guys to know too, right? Uh, um, so recruitment employees from a diverse population. The set of activities used to obtain a sufficient number of the right people at the right time. So here's an example of external sources of outside ways to recruit people. You got everything here. I think the one thing I don't see, I think, is Headhunter. Maybe it's there, maybe it's not. Um, but companies hire headhunters to specifically find someone of a specific skill set and try to negotiate with them some sort of pay structure or something to get them to move or come over to another company. And headhunters are like, if you have a director, I have a director position open, right? So I need to hire someone to fill that. You might want to hire a headhunter separate from your external sources and internal sources. You can give someone promotion within and train them and say, okay, take this job. But headhunters are, their job is to go out there and hunt for somebody, right? And that somebody could still be having a job, right? You are happy working your job, and someone calls you and says, ring ring, I want to offer you a job at a competitor, and here's what we're offering, right? So that's not an HR thing. It is an HR thing, actually, but headhunters are usually like third parties. There could be headhunters that work for a company. You could be a headhunter firm. That's their, you hire them, you contract them, they do that for you. They get paid when they bring someone on board. Usually commission or something. But so this is just sort of the sources of where HR, human resources, would get their employees from external to internal. So the selection here is, how do you select people? Obtain applications, conduct initial and follow-up interviews, giving the employee tests, which I think is actually important. You could tell me, you could fake a resume. You could make a fake resume. I went to this school. I know this guy. I did this. I did that. I had these leads. I had these sales. It's like, okay, so prove it. And what if a person gives you fake data? What if they give you fake numbers? What if they give you something that someone faked or created? Especially with AI now, you can fake all day. You can make a fake video for real, right? So you're telling me you know how to do the job, and I'm like, well, all right, that's cool. I'm going to test you. So to me, employee testing sometimes it's old school. People have issues with it. There's issues about employee testing. I don't know. There shouldn't be issues. But yeah, I think because of the current environment, it's important to be able to test. All right. You conduct background investigations, very, very common HR thing. They'll take your social, your date of birth. They'll run a background check. Physical exams, if it's something your job requires, I guess you would do something physical. Usually maybe checking for drug tests or something, depending on what type of work you're doing. And then establishing a probationary period where they can just let you go if they want to immediately, uh, predominantly because of risk factors that can occur early on with hiring someone. So contingent workers is just, it means you're a part-time worker. That's what that means, okay? And then managing contingent workers, training and development, 3 steps: assessing an organizational needs and employee skills to determine the training needs, creating those training activities, and evaluating if the training is effective, right? So it's always this process of what do we need? How do we deliver that? Deliver it, and then did delivery work? Did it work? The execution work? And that's just sort of the very standard scientific process you'll see in like all these chapters we're talking about. It's the same process, right? It's sort of assessing the situation, assessing the circumstances, creating an action plan, implementing the action plan, measuring the action plan, seeing if it was effective, and then making adjustments, right? And that's just like the workflow of everything. And you see similarly, what does the company need? Creating the training activities, and then the effectiveness, right? And that's just how everything works with everything in an organization, right? It's process, managing the process, evaluating the process, understanding the process, the standards, the rules, the requirements, measuring it, delivering it, assessing it, reporting it, adjusting it, and then coming back, feedback with a looping back in. Standard for everything, right? You could do that for almost anything. And then a manager to oversee that, right? So most common training and development activities: orientation, on the job training, apprenticeships where you learn underneath someone, training offsite, online training, vestibule training, and job simulations. So management development is the process of training and educating employees to become good managers. Most of professional management development is like experiential. So first you have to know the job, right? You need to know who you're training. You're training a bunch of people. Your people are underneath you. You don't understand all their job functions, the activities of their job, the movements of their job. What are all of the operational aspects of their job? Then you're probably training underneath or under the study of an actual manager. So you will then travel and shadow other managers at different locations and see how they do. Just work with them, just shadow them, watch them do their job, watch them manage people, watch them, listen to them, give feedback. And you might shadow multiple people for a whole month or longer. And then after you do that and you're managing your own thing, you have the support and supervision to make sure you do it properly, right? So management development is more hands-on, it's more understudy, it's more coaching, on the job coaching. But the prerequisite is you need to understand what you're managing, right? All the job roles under you. You should understand the operational output of those job roles. You should understand because you can't measure it, you can't critique it if you don't understand it, right? Well, you're going to measure someone and give them feedback or manage them. You don't know what the heck they're doing. You don't know how to do their job, right? It doesn't matter what level you are. You could be at the very top of the company. You should really know you should know how your employees do their job at the bottom, right? So anyway, so networking and mentors is other ways to train as well. Diversity and management development, women and minorities are gaining networking advantages. Reasons to develop female minority managers. It isn't about legality, morality, and morale, but rather about bringing more talent. Diversity, brings innovation, which is a fact. It's not an opinion, that's a fact. Diversity brings innovation, different minds, different thinking, different processes, different people. You get different ideas. Brings challenges too, right? So when everyone thinks and acts the same way, it's predictable. It creates predictability in management. So it's easy to manage something predictable. So if everyone you work around is just like you, is easy, is comfortable. But organizationally, you're going to have poor innovation or questionable innovation. Or just in general, there's a lack of levels of potential innovation. So, cultures can clash. How do you manage that? So how does the company create a culture to manage that effectively and in a positive way? And that's some of the things we kind of discussed and looked at in our prior chapters, right? Performance appraisal, an evaluation that measures employees' performance against established standards in order to make decisions about promotions, right? So how many times you've heard someone say, I should have got that promotion? How did he get promoted? You hear it all the time. You have to have a clear, distinct performance appraisal, right? It should be on the it's just number. It should be. You look at the military; they got a system. This is how it works. Distinct. There's no distinction. There's no ambiguity, right? But HR, they like ambiguity. Companies like ambiguity because ambiguity means they can seek their own agenda, organizational agenda, right? But when you have ambiguity and you lack clarity, it creates problems in terms of identifying talent, growing talent, improving talent. So it's a catch-22, right? Okay, so 6 steps of performance appraisal: establishing performance standards that are understandable, measurable, and reasonable, right? You gotta understand and measure how someone's able to perform to grade and critique them, right? You got to be able to communicate those standards. You have to evaluate performance against the standards, so evaluate it, and discuss the results with employees. You take corrective actions, and then using the results, you make a decision. One of the worst things is when the evaluation of those standards is there's ambiguity. And this is like we'll go over one more thing before we end the lecture. But sometimes I would judge students and judge their business projects, right? Not necessarily BMCC, but CUNY as a whole, and other non-CUNY purely academic organizations. We're judging students and adults their business ideas, right? Kind of like a Shark Tank type of thing. And we're appraising them and we're judging them, and there's this rubric or criteria of how you judge them. I'm always looking at the criteria, and I'm like, there's a lot of ambiguity. And then when the judges sit down, sometimes we don't agree on things because of ambiguity, right? And sometimes maybe you think something, and a judge brings up something you didn't think of. You say, "Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, I'm going to change my score." And that happens because the standards, the more reasonable, the more measurable, the more understandable the standards are, the less ambiguity you get in assessment. The more clear you can communicate those standards, like understand them, communicate it, and we understand each other, the less ambiguity you get. Okay. So a lot of times people create rubrics and it's like, okay, I get the rubric, but there's like a lot of opinion and feeling about how the observer or the judge or the manager, or whomever, decides to assess the standard of the performance or the results or the measurement. And the less ambiguity, which requires a lot of process and thinking and understanding, the less you're going to have those issues of of improper assessment. So I want to say it's an art form in its own, but if you just look at these 6 steps and you just look at the first 2 or 3, and then you look at a rubric, and you're saying, is the rubric assessing this? And I'm not talking about your grades, your class work. I'm talking about like, uh, just jobs. Like, do this job. We can see what you're doing, right? I can see exactly what you're doing, what you're not doing. So it's cut and dry. There shouldn't be any ambiguity, but there's always ambiguity, always. All right, and that's because it's not measurable, it's not reasonable, it's not understandable. The standards aren't clearly communicated. There's a lot of vagueness and sometimes deliberate, but that's a poor appraisal. It's a poor performance appraisal. It's a poor way to assess talent, to grow talent, right? Sometimes it's not about it being complicated. It's just looking and understanding of uh it's understanding what's going on. Okay. Now, the last thing I'm gonna go with you guys is pay system, right? So salary is not an hourly wage. A salary is where you get paid a fixed amount. Okay. An hourly wage is where you get paid by the hour. They're different. If I work 60 hours, 70 hours, 80 hours as a salaried employee, I still get a fixed pay. For an hourly employee, if I work 60, 70, 80, 90 hours, I get paid by the hour. I get paid more, right? So usually managers are salaried, non-manager managed employees are hourly. Some companies want to take an hourly employee and then say they're a manager. So they pay them a salary and then make them work more to pay them less. That's illegal. I'm going to say it again. That's illegal. Large institutions have been sued for a lot of money and lost their lawsuits because they play this game. Okay. And smaller companies play this game all the time too. You need to understand. All right. If you're a salaried employee, you need to be having certain type of tasks, designated responsibilities, things that kind of fall under a managerial role or a supervisory role, justifiably so, for you to be salaried. So you have to meet certain requirements to be salaried for a legal standpoint. Okay, so you guys should know that. You know that now. All right. There's commissions. You make a sale, you get a piece of the sale. Bonuses, you hit certain numbers, you get paid more. Okay. And then gain share plans and stock options where you get bonuses and options to buy stocks in the company. All right. So I'm going to end the lesson here. Do you guys have any other questions for me pertaining to anything in particular before I end the lecture?